The day my brother walked into my company's lobby for a job interview, I was in the middle of a call with our biggest client. My assistant knocked on the glass door of my office and I waved her off once, then a second time when she knocked again. She didn't knock a third time. Instead, she opened the door 6 inches and just looked at me, and the expression on her face was so strange, not alarmed, not urgent, just this wide eyed look of someone who has just witnessed something they can't quite categorize, that I told the client I'd call them back. "There's a man downstairs," Priya said. "He's here for the 2 o'clock marketing director interview." "Okay," I said. "So?" He gave his name as Derek Calloway. The room went very quiet. Or maybe it wasn't the room. Maybe it was just the inside of my head. Derek Calloway is my brother. I hadn't spoken to Derek in 4 years. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 3. And in that moment, sitting in the leather chair behind the desk I'd bought with my own money in the office I'd built from nothing, I had approximately 90 seconds to decide what to do before the 2 o'clock slot became awkward for everyone involved. What I did was take a slow breath, straighten my jacket, and tell Priya to send him up. I want to explain what happened before I explain what happened next, because context matters here. Context is the whole point, actually. This story doesn't make sense without the 10 years that came before it. And the 10 years don't make sense without the summer I turned 18, which is where all of this really begins. That was the summer my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and told me there was no money for college. That wasn't entirely true. There had been money for college. My parents had opened a 529 savings account when I was born. My mother told me about it when I was 12, told me she and my dad had been putting money in it since I was an infant, that it was earmarked for my education. She said it the way parents say things they're proud of. She was proud of it. I remember thinking that was the most responsible, loving thing I'd ever heard. I remember thinking my parents were good people. I was 18 when I found out the account had been emptied 4 years earlier. Not emptied, redirected. Derek is 5 years younger than me. He was 14 when my parents decided he had a future in competitive tennis. He'd been good at it since he was 10, genuinely good, not parrot delusion good, and when his coach told them he had real potential, they made a decision. They enrolled him in a private tennis academy that cost $40,000 a year. They hired a private coach on top of that. They traveled with him to tournaments across the country and later to tournaments across the country and later to tournaments abroad. They funded it all, with my college money. I found this out in pieces. The initial conversation at the kitchen table was just, "We don't have the savings we thought we did. Things got tight. We're sorry. We know this is a shock." There was no mention of Derek. There was no mention of the tennis academy. My mother cried. My father said he'd look into loans, community college options, some way to help me figure it out. It took me another 3 months to understand where the money had actually gone, and by then, I was already working 2 jobs and enrolled in a state school on a combination of financial aid and loans I'd be paying off for the next decade. I never made a scene about it. That's the thing people always find strange when I tell this story. I never stood up and screamed at my parents. I never confronted Derek. I just got very quiet, very internal, and I filed it away in the part of myself where I kept the things that were true but too painful to look at directly. What I did instead was work. I worked through college. I worked through 2 internships that paid almost nothing. I got a job in marketing at a mid-sized software company right out of school, spent 4 years there learning everything I could, left and joined a startup, watched that startup almost fold, helped keep it alive through a rough patch, and then, when the founders decided to pivot away from the division I'd been running, I looked at what I'd built, looked at the team I'd assembled, looked at the client relationships I'd developed, and I thought, why not take this with me? I started Calloway Creative in my apartment. I was 27 years old. I had 3 clients, 2 contractors, and a business account with $4,000 in it. 6 years later, I had 42 employees, 11 major clients, and revenue I had never imagined generating when I was sitting at that kitchen table being told the money was gone. I need to be clear about something. I am not telling this story to brag about my success. I'm telling it because the success is inseparable from the wound. Every time I signed a new client, every time I hired someone new, every time I made a payroll without sweating, there was a quiet voice in the back of my head reminding me that I had done this without anyone's help, without the money that was supposed to be mine, without a safety net, on my own. That voice wasn't bitterness exactly. It was something more complicated, a kind of fuel that kept me going even on the weeks when everything felt impossible. And it was also, I will admit, the reason my relationship with my family had eroded so completely by the time I was in my early 30s. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a blow up, a dramatic confrontation, a moment where everything exploded and then went cold. It was more like a slow drainage, holidays that got harder and harder to get through. Conversations that felt like performances where everyone was pretending the subtext didn't exist. My father asking me how work was going in a tone that made it clear he didn't actually want the true answer. My mother praising Derek's tennis career, which had never produced a professional contract, which had fizzled out by his mid 20s, with the same enthusiasm she might have had if he'd won Wimbledon. And Derek himself, who had spent his formative years being treated like the special one, had grown into an adult with a very high sense of his own worth and a very low tolerance for being treated as ordinary. We were polite to each other. We were never cruel. But by the time I stopped attending family events, the estrangement wasn't really a surprise to anyone, including me. My mother called me 3 times a year, my birthday, Christmas, and Easter, and I answered those calls and kept them short and warm and hollow. My father didn't call at all. Derek and I had not exchanged a single message in 4 years. And then he walked into my lobby for a job interview. I want to tell you that when he came into my office, I was calm and collected and handled it with total professionalism. I was calm, I was collected, I handled it professionalism. But my heart was doing something very strange in my chest, and the room felt simultaneously too small and too large. And when Derek walked through the door and saw me sitting behind the desk, the color drained out of his face in a way that was genuinely startling. He stopped moving. I gestured at the chair across from me. He sat down slowly, like a man lowering himself into water whose temperature he doesn't trust. Derek, I said. I didn't. He started, stopped, started again. I didn't know this was your company. And here's the thing that I find interesting. Looking back, I believed him. Calloway Creative. His last name. My last name. The same name. It's not as unlikely a coincidence as it might sound, because Callaway is not a common name, and because when you're applying for jobs in a specific industry and you filter by reputation and client roster and review scores, which Derek obviously had done because he'd made it to a second-round interview, you might not stop to think about who founded the company. You might not look up the founder. You might not put together that the company named Callaway in the sector you're targeting was started by your older sister. The same older sister whose college fund paid for your tennis career. He hadn't known. I could see it in his face. Not guilt, not calculation, not the expression of someone whose plan had just been disrupted. Just pure shock. The kind that makes you look younger than you are, the kind that strips away whatever composure you carried into the room. We sat there in silence for what felt like a very long time. You're the marketing director position, I finally said. Yeah, you made it to the final round. I know. A pause. I really didn't know, Ellie. He called me Ellie. He's the only person who has ever called me that. It's not short for anything. It's not even close to my actual name, Eleanor. It's just the name he gave me when he was 4 years old and couldn't pronounce the full word, and he'd always called me that, and somewhere along the way, I had grown to love it, and hearing it in that moment made something in my chest do something I hadn't expected. I told him I needed a few minutes and I would be right back, and I walked out of my office and down the hall to the small kitchen at the end of the floor, and I stood in front of the coffee maker for a long time without making coffee. What I was actually doing was having a conversation with myself that I should probably have had years earlier. The easy thing, the satisfying thing, the thing that would have felt like narrative justice if you were watching this from the outside, would have been to walk back in there and tell him the position had been filled, or to conduct the interview with cold professionalism and then not hire him, or to be honest and say, "You're my brother and you don't know what your life cost me. And I can't separate you from that, so you should go." Any of those choices would have been defensible. Nobody watching from the outside would have blamed me. But I stood in that kitchen and I asked myself a question that I hadn't let myself ask in a long time. What did I actually want? Not what would feel satisfying, not what would be poetically just. What did I actually want for my life going forward? And the answer that came back was complicated and quiet and not what I expected. I walked back to my office. I sat down. I looked at my brother, who was sitting in the chair with his hands clasped and a look on his face that I can only describe as someone waiting for a sentence to be handed down. "I'm going to ask you some questions," I said, "about the position, and I want you to answer them honestly, not because you think they're what I want to hear, but because I'm going to know the difference, and then we're going to talk about something else. Okay?" He nodded. So I interviewed him. And this is where the story gets strange again, because Derek, my brother Derek, who I had not spoken to in 4 years, who had spent his formative years being coddled and carried by money that was supposed to be mine, was extraordinarily good at his job. He'd built a career in brand strategy after the tennis thing ended. He'd worked at two agencies and one in house role, and his portfolio was sharp and coherent and showed exactly the kind of strategic thinking we needed for the direction the company was going. He answered my questions without deflection, pushed back on one of my premises in a way that was correct, and demonstrated an understanding of our client landscape that suggested he'd done serious homework before the interview. He was good. He was genuinely, objectively good. And sitting across from him, watching him talk about brand architecture and consumer insight and competitive positioning, I saw something I hadn't looked at clearly in years. My brother, not as the person who had displaced me, but as a person who had been handed an enormous gift by our parents and who had spent it and who had then had to figure out what to do when the gift ran out and who had apparently figured it out. That didn't make what happened okay. I want to be clear about that. It didn't erase the loans or the years of grinding or the nights I spent terrified that the whole thing was going to collapse. It didn't rewrite the history, but it did complicate the story I had been telling myself. After the interview questions, I closed my notebook. I need to tell you something, I said. He looked at me. Do you know why I started this company? He shook his head slowly. Because I didn't have another option. Because the money that was supposed to help me go to a better school, get a better start, have some kind of cushion, it was gone, and I had to build something from scratch, alone, and I did. And this, I gestured at the office, the floor, the building below us, is what came out of that. He was very still. I know where the money went, I said. I figured it out years ago. I never said anything to you about it. I'm saying it now because I think you should know. The silence after that was different from the earlier silence. It was heavier. I didn't know, Derek said, and his voice was different now. Quieter, stripped of the professional register he'd been using for the interview. Not until, I always knew they put me in the academy. I knew it was expensive, but I never knew where the money came from. I just thought. He stopped. I thought they had money. I thought that's just what it was. I know, I said. When did you find out? When I was 18, right before I started college. He looked like he'd been hit. Not dramatically, just this slow recognition spreading across his face. This recalibration of something he thought he understood. Ellie, he said. Don't, I said. Not harshly, just a stop sign. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because it's the truth, and it's been sitting between us for 15 years, and I thought we should both just know that it's there. He nodded. His jaw was tight. I'm going to think about the position, I said. I'm going to talk to my hiring team, and I'm going to think about it properly without this in the room, and I'll let you know by Friday. He stood up. He held out his hand. I shook it. For what it's worth, he said, this is what you've built. It's incredible. Mom mentioned you had a company, but she never told me it was this. Of course she didn't, I said. He left. I sat in my office for a long time after that, staring at nothing. Here's what nobody tells you about being good at something. It doesn't actually resolve the old wounds. The success doesn't retroactively heal the injury. You can be standing in an office you built and running a company that works and surrounded by people who respect and trust you. And there is still a version of you that is 18 years old and sitting at a kitchen table and being told the money is gone. That version doesn't disappear. She just gets further away. But that afternoon, for the first time in a long time, I could feel the distance. I talked to my hiring team. I talked to Marcus, my COO, who had been with me for 4 years and who knew me well enough to know when I was in the middle of something. I told him the situation, all of it, the college fund, the estrangement, the interview, the portfolio, and I asked him to look at Derek's application with completely fresh eyes and tell me what he would do if the personal history didn't exist. Marcus called me back 2 hours later. Honestly, he said, he's the strongest candidate we've seen for this role in 6 months. His strategic thinking is exactly what we need for the Meridian account, and his references are excellent. Do you think he can handle working in a company where his sister is the CEO? A pause. I think that depends entirely on you two. I called my mother that night. This might be the most surprising part of the story. Not the interview, not the history, not even what happened next with Derek. The most surprising part is that phone call, because I had not voluntarily called my mother in 4 years. She had always called me. I had always answered. I had never initiated. She picked up on the second ring. Ellie? Her voice was immediately concerned. Is everything okay? Derek came in for an interview today, I said. At my company. A very long silence. He didn't know it was yours, she said. It wasn't quite a question. I know he didn't. I could tell. Eleanor? I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to answer me honestly. Did you ever tell him about the savings account? About where the money for the academy came from? Another long silence. I counted 4 seconds. We told him the family had made sacrifices, she said. We didn't go into the specifics. So he didn't know it was my college fund? He was 14, Eleanor. He was a child. We didn't. I know, I said. I know he didn't know. That's not what I'm angry about. What are you angry about? I thought about it. I had thought about it for 15 years, and I had never quite put it into words, not out loud, not to her. I'm angry that you told me it was there, I said. And then it wasn't. And I had to figure that out by myself. And I had to put myself through school and build everything from zero, and you never once, not once, Mom, acknowledged that. You never said, we took from you to give to him. You never said you were sorry for that. You just acted like it hadn't happened. She was quiet for a long time. You never said anything, she said finally, and her voice was different, softer, the edge of something that might have been shame in it. We thought you were okay. I was okay, I said. I made myself okay. That's not the same thing. I heard her breathing. She might have been crying. I couldn't tell. I'm sorry, Eleanor, she said. I don't know if. She stopped. Tried again. I don't think we understood what we were doing to you. I don't think we let ourselves understand. It was the closest thing to an honest acknowledgement I had ever gotten. It wasn't everything. It wasn't the tearful reckoning I had imagined sometimes, the moment where all of it got laid out and properly examined. It was just a small, fragile thing, one sentence in a voice that sounded tired on a phone call she hadn't expected. It was something. I'm going to make a decision about Derek's application on its merits, I told her. That's all I can promise you. I know, she said. That's fair. That's more than fair. I hired him. I want to be clear. This was not a redemption story. It was not the moment where I forgave everyone and the family healed and we all sat down to a warm holiday dinner and the past was behind us. That's not what happened. What happened was considerably messier and more human and more real than that. What happened was that Derek started on a Monday in March, and the first 3 months were genuinely difficult. Not because he wasn't good at his job. He was excellent at his job, even better in practice than he'd been in the interview, with a natural instinct for client relationships and a creativity in strategy sessions that the team responded to immediately. Not because he was inappropriate or overstepping or trying to leverage our relationship. He wasn't. He was relentlessly professional in a way that actually told me something about how much he wanted this to work. But there were moments. There were small, charged moments that neither of us had a script for. The first time he called me Ellie in a meeting, by accident, clearly the word out of his mouth before he could catch it. The room got very quiet, and then everyone pretended they hadn't noticed. He turned red. I let it go. There was a week in the second month when we were both in back-to-back sessions for a major pitch, and we were working late every night, and the exhaustion stripped away some of the formality. And we started talking in the kitchen at 9:30 at night the way I imagine we might have talked to each other if things had been different. If we'd grown up alongside each other, if things had been different. If we'd grown up alongside each other as equals, instead of as the favored one and the forgotten one. One night, he said, "Can I ask you something?" Sure, I said. Did you name the company after yourself or after the family? I thought about that. Neither, I said. I named it after what I had, which was my name and nothing else. He was quiet. Then, I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am. I know, I said. Does it help, knowing that? Not in the way you might think, I said. But a little. Yes, we won the pitch, by the way. The real complication, the one that I had anticipated but hadn't fully prepared for, came in the fourth month, when my father called me. My father, who had not called me in 3 years. Not on my birthday, not at Christmas. Just nothing. Silence. The kind of quiet that communicates something without saying it. He called me on a Wednesday afternoon, and when I saw his name on my phone screen, I felt 16 again in a way I hadn't felt in years. I heard you hired your brother, he said without a greeting. Hello, Dad. I think that's, he paused. I think that was a generous thing. It was a business decision, I said. Right. He cleared his throat. He says the company is extraordinary. He says you've built something really remarkable. We have, I said. My team and I. Another throat clear. I know things have been, Dad, I said. What did you want to say? A long pause. I wanted to say that I'm proud of you. His voice was rough. I should have said that a long time ago. And we should have handled things differently. When you were starting out, we should have been more honest with you and we should have found a way to help you. I stood in my office and looked out the window at the city below, and I thought about 18-year-old me, working a double shift to cover the first semester of tuition, calling the financial aid office on her lunch break, crying in her car once when the anxiety got too heavy to carry while standing up. I know, I said. I don't know how to fix it, he said. You probably can't, I said. Not cruelly, just honestly. No, he said. Probably not. A pause. But I wanted you to know I see it now. What we did, it wasn't enough. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't enough to repair 15 years of distance or undo the weight I'd carried or make the version of me that was 18 feel retroactively supported. You can't make up for absence with a phone call. You can't apologize away the years. But it was real. And it was more than I'd expected from him. After I hung up, I sat for a long time and I thought about a question that I don't think had an easy answer. What do I actually want from these people now? Not what would be fair, not what I deserved. What did I actually want? I didn't have a clean answer. I still don't. What I had 6 months after Derek started was this: a high performing marketing director who happened to be my brother, with whom I was slowly, carefully, incompletely rebuilding something that I couldn't quite name yet. Not a friendship exactly, not the sibling relationship we'd never really had, something new, something that had no precedent between us because everything that had come before had been built in an imbalance we hadn't even fully understood. There were still hard days. There were still moments where I'd be in a meeting and I'd look across the table at Derek and think, without meaning to, he's here because of money that was mine. He's here because they took from me to give to him. And I'd have to put that thought in a box and close the lid and keep going. Because the alternative was to burn the whole thing down. And I had long since decided I didn't want to do that. I'll tell you the moment I knew something had shifted, though. It was 8 months in. We were presenting to a prospective client, a big one, the kind of client that would represent a significant revenue jump for the company. Derek had built the strategy. I had refined the pitch. We'd rehearsed it together 3 times. And we were sitting in their boardroom, and the presentation was going well. And then their CEO asked a question that wasn't in our a sharp, skeptical question about a specific assumption in our market analysis. And I saw Derek sit up straighter, and I knew before he opened his mouth that he had the answer. He walked them through it. He was calm and clear and precise, and he turned their skepticism into a follow-up conversation that took 20 minutes and ended with the CEO leaning forward and saying, "I think we should move to next steps." Afterward, in the elevator, Derek exhaled and looked at the ceiling. "That question," he said. "You were great," I said. He looked at me. "We got them?" "I think so." He grinned. This sudden, unguarded thing that I hadn't seen on his face in years, that I associated with when he was young, before the pressure of the academy and the expectation and everything that came after it. "Ellie," he said. "Don't," I said. "I know," he said. "But I know," he said. "But I know," I said. We stood there in the elevator and we didn't say anything else. And the doors opened on the ground floor and we walked out into the afternoon. And neither of us brought it up again. There are things I'm still working through. I want to be honest about that. The process of rebuilding a relationship with my family after this long a silence is not linear. There are weeks when I feel genuinely okay, and weeks when old resentments surface without warning. When I'll be in the middle of something mundane and I'll suddenly feel the specific weight of being 18 and broke and entirely alone in my struggle. I have never had the grand reckoning with my parents that part of me still wants, the scene where everything gets named and examined and properly grieved. My mother and I speak more regularly now, and the calls are more honest than they used to be, but there is a formality to them still, a carefulness that I suspect may never entirely go away. My father and I have spoken maybe 5 times in the past year. The conversations are short and awkward and carry a great deal of unspoken weight. I am not sure what to do with that yet. What I know is this: Derek is one of the best hires I have ever made. He has brought in 2 major clients on his own, has built genuine trust with the team, and has shown a commitment to the company that I don't think has anything to do with the personal history between us and everything to do with the personal history between us and everything to do with the fact that this is work he is genuinely good at and genuinely invested in. I know that the company I built, the one I built on borrowed money and sheer stubbornness and the kind of determination that comes from having no alternative, that company is exceptional. I know this not because I need the validation, not because it's a symbol of anything, but simply because I look at what we've made and I can see the quality in it. I also know that the story of my success and the story of my injury are not separate stories. They never were. The money that was taken from me shaped the person who built this company. The absence of a safety net made me someone who never takes one for granted. The loneliness of that early struggle made me someone who builds teams carefully, who invests in people, who understands what it means to feel unsupported in something you're trying to create. I don't know if I would trade it. I don't know if that question even makes sense. What I know is that my brother is down the hall right now arguing with someone on his team about campaign positioning. And I can hear his voice through the glass, and it sounds like someone who belongs there. And I know that the version of me who sat at that kitchen table and got told the money was gone, she deserved better than what she got. Both of those things are true at the same time. I keep thinking about something Derek said to me about 3 months in when we were stuck late at the office and the building had gone quiet around us. He said, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I want to say something, and I don't want you to dismiss it as just, I don't know, as not enough, because it's not enough. I know it's not. Okay, I said. I would have given it back, he said. I would have given it back, he said, if I had known. The money. I would have found a way, I don't know how, at 14, but I would have tried. I looked at him. I know, I said. And the thing is, I actually believed him. That's the complicated part. I believed that the Derek who was sitting across from me, the adult, the one who had worked for his career and struggled after the tennis ended and built something real, I believed that person would have tried. Whether the 14-year-old version of him would have, I don't know. I doubt it. 14-year-old Derek was living in a world our parents had constructed for him, a world in which he was exceptional and his future was the priority, and he hadn't built the capacity yet to look outside that frame. But the 40-year-old version of him sat across from me in a quiet office and told me the truth, and I believed him. That's the ending, or the closest thing to an ending this story has, because there is no clean resolution here. There's no moment where the debt gets paid, or the wound fully closes, or the family becomes the thing it never was. That's not how this works. What there is instead is this: two people, imperfectly, carefully, awkwardly figuring out how to be in the same room without the history swallowing them. A company that exists because someone had no other option and chose to make that option into something extraordinary. A set of parents who are slowly, belatedly reckoning with a thing they did a long time ago and have not known how to name. And somewhere in there, I think something that might eventually grow into forgiveness. Not yet, not completely. But the shape of it is starting to become visible, the way you can sometimes see a mountain forming in the mist before the air clears entirely. I don't know what I would tell the 18-year-old version of me if I could reach back and say something. Maybe nothing. Maybe just, you're going to be okay, and more than okay, and the thing that is being taken from you right now is going to cost them more than it cost you, eventually, though you won't see that for a long time. Or maybe I'd just say, build the company. Take what you have, which is only your name and your drive, and the clarity that comes from having nothing to lose, and build something that belongs to you and nobody else. And then, one day, when everything you built is already yours and already proven and already real, let them in, on your terms, in your time,